Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, how much could depending on your location. Please join in the struggle to liberate our people from the contraption. Like and share videos. Nuro luayo, na nuro luayo. Nuro luayo, na nuro luayo. Ọ dịghị mgbe ike mmadụ ga-akarị ike Chukwu. Ọ dịghị mgbe ike Naịjirịa ga-akarị ike Biafra. Nna nuro, onye kere ụwa nuro luayo. Nna nuro, Olisa bi n'igwe nụrụ akwa yo. Now, the news update.
Court section started with the judge rendering a brief and quick remark on how the court section today would look like and play out. After the speech, the prosecuting lawyer started by thanking the judge. He also informed the judge that he will be bringing up his fourth witness. This witness is an officer from the NBI, which also means the National Bureau of Investigations. The prosecuting lawyer called up the officer codenamed T4, which probably might mean testifier 4 or testifier number 4. He asked T4 to take the stand. T4 walked up to the stand and did all necessary rites needed to be done. The prosecuting lawyer asked T4, "Who are you and why are you here today?" T4 replied, "I work with the NBI and I'm here to testify against the suspect," while pointing at Simon, who was seated with his lawyer. "You said you work for the NBI?" the prosecuting lawyer asked. "Yes," replied the officer codenamed T4. "In what capacity, if I may ask?" The officer said, "I headed the unit that thoroughly investigated this man here," while pointing at Simon, who was seated calmly. The prosecuting lawyer asked T4, "After investigating him, what did you find?" "Well, we found a lot of evidence. In fact, we found chains of evidence that we managed to gather in less than 4 months." The prosecuting lawyer replied by saying, "Are you going to present your findings to us today?" T4 replied by stating, "Definitely." The prosecuting lawyer asked, "Are these documents the authentic or just photocopies?" T4 said, "I have with me some duplicate copies, but if the court wants the original, I will furnish the court without any form of hesitation." Well, before we continue with what played out in the courtroom afterwards, let's do some quick analysis. Hope you guys are paying attention on what is playing out in the courtroom. An officer was brought before the court to give testimonies that will be used against Simon. We noticed that the prosecuting lawyer is just wasting time by asking irrelevant questions. Maybe he's trying to mount pressure on Simon and the legal counsel team, or maybe he's trying to buy time for himself. We will definitely find out. Let's go back to the courtroom and see what followed suit afterwards. Back in the courtroom, the prosecuting lawyer asked T4, "From your investigations, what can you say about this man?" asked the prosecuting lawyer. "This man is a terrorist," replied T4. At this point, Simon and his legal counsel team got really angry, and this is when full-scale drama played out in the courtroom. The prosecuting lawyer asked again, "Do you think this man is innocent?" Simon's lawyer stood up and said, "My lord, these people don't have anything meaningful to present to us in this court. This man has been asking a lot of irrelevant questions. I can't sit here and let this nonsense continue. My client has been very angry and would like to speak." Yes, let's do some quick analysis, just in case you don't understand. Things are getting intense in the courtroom. Simon's lawyer has informed the court that Simon would want to say a word or two because he is not too satisfied with the accusations coming from the witness, codenamed T4. Well, let's go back to the courtroom and see what played out. Simon stood up and walked to the stands. At this point, nobody knew what he had in mind. Nobody knew the intentions or the goals of Simon. Simon entered the stands. He was sworn in as a testimonial and not a witness. The judge gave Simon the permission to speak, and what he said was very, very emotional. Let's listen. Simon kicked off by saying, "Your Honor, members of the jury, my family, and my friends, I stand before you today accused of a crime that I did not commit. The weight of these false accusations crushes me. To be labeled a terrorist, a threat to society, is a burden heavier than any chains. My heart aches with the injustice of it all. I have always strived to live a life of peace, of service, of love for my community. The evidence presented, I believe, will show that this accusation is a cruel misunderstanding, a tragic error. I trust in the fairness of this court, and I pray that the truth will prevail. My faith in justice remains unshaken, even in the face of this overwhelming adversity. Thank you." At this point, there were full-scale silence in the courtroom because nobody was expecting this to play out like it just did. Let's do some quick analysis. As you can all see and hear, Simon has rendered a speech nobody was expecting, not even T4, the NBI officer. We all believe that if Simon takes the stand, he will probably quarrel with the prosecuting lawyer, but that was not the case at all. He came in, made a short, emotional speech, and left the whole court in silence. And this was a perfect opportunity for Simon's lawyer to jump in and change the atmosphere, which he did. Let's go back to the courtroom and see what followed suit immediately after Simon rendered that heartwarming speech. Back in the courtroom, Simon's lawyer stood up and said, "My lord, as you can see, my client here is very, very sober because of the way and manner he has been treated over time in detention. My client here is innocent and he would like to cross-examine T4, who claims to be an officer from the NBI. The prosecuting lawyer stood up immediately and objected a request coming from Simon's lawyer. The judge replied by saying, "The suspect has the right to cross-examine the witness. In fact, the accused or suspect. This is an essential part of ensuring a fair trial and allowing the defense to challenge the evidence presented against them." The judge gave Simon the green light to cross-examine the officer. Let's do some quick analysis. As you can see, for the very first time, the Court of Law has granted Simon the permission and the authority to cross-examine a witness brought before the courtroom today. That is to say, Simon will cross-examine T4, a man who is an officer from the NBI, which simply means an officer of the National Bureau of Investigation. So Simon has this ample opportunity to cross-examine this officer and get info from him, deduce info and data from this man, and also know the level of fact and evidence he has, or the document he has that he wants to use against Simon. This is where things got really, really interesting. The conversation had between Simon and this officer is very, very intense and remarkable. Let's go back to the courtroom and see what followed suit. After the court granted Simon the green light, he started by saying, "Thank you, my lord, for instituting my right as an accused. Thank you, and I appreciate this kind gesture." Simon continued. Simon started by saying, "T4, you stated repeatedly that I am a terrorist. Is that correct?" T4 replied by saying, "Yes, based on the evidence gathered during the investigation. That is my professional assessment." Simon continued by saying, "Your professional assessment? Is that what you call it? You've labeled me, a man who has lived peacefully in this country for decades, a terrorist? What specific actions led you to this conclusion?" T4 continued by saying, or replied by saying, "The evidence points to your involvement in planning and supporting activities that could be classified as such. We have evidence of your communications." Simon interrupted T4 by saying, "Communications? You mean the encrypted messages you claim I sent? Have you considered that those messages could be misinterpreted?" T4 replied by saying, "We have analyzed the context, the language used, the targets discussed. They align with terrorist activities." Simon continued by saying, "Targets discussed. Are you referring to the online forum where I expressed frustration with the government?" Frustration, Mr. T4, is not terrorism. It's a right I exercise like many others. Did you find any evidence of actual violence or of attacks planned or executed by me? T4 replied by saying, "The planning was evident in the coded language." Simon interrupted the T4 by saying, "Guidance, or perhaps just share my opinion, my thoughts. Is that a crime now? Is it a crime to disagree with the government, to express anger?" Simon continued by saying, "So, my words, my opinions are now enough to brand me a terrorist. Have you considered the possibility that somebody or someone might be trying to frame me, that the messages could be fabricated or manipulated?" T4 replied by saying, "We have considered all possibilities. Our analysis is thorough." Simon interrupted by saying, "Thorough or biased? Did you look at my life, my history, my community involvement? Did you speak to my neighbors, my friends, the people who know me?" T4 replied by saying, "We spoke to those individuals." Simon continued by saying, "And what did they say? Did they paint me a picture of a terrorist or a man who loves his family, who helps the community, who has always strived to live a peaceful life?" T4 pauses and continued by saying, "Some of them expressed surprise." Simon continued with, "Surprise? Because they know the truth, don't they? They know that I am not a monster you've painted me to be. So tell me, investigator, or T4 as they fondly call you in court, on what solid, undeniable evidence do you base your claim that I am a terrorist? Because from where I stand, it looks like you are trying to destroy my life based on assumptions, on interpretations, and on narrative that suits you." Before we continue, let's do a quick analysis of what we think is currently going on here. As you can see, that was a good showing from Simon. This man has confidently asked the right questions and defended and expressed himself. Wow, this clearly shows that Simon happens to be a lawyer. Yes, because this man runs and operates a law firm known as Ekpa and Co. This guy has shown that he is actually a lawyer by asking the right questions and defending himself perfectly, with no mistakes or without any form of errors. Wow, at this point, nobody knows what is coming next. But Simon follows suit by asking T4 to present documents to the courtroom. Let's go back to the courtroom and see what happened next. Simon continued by saying, "Investigator T4, you've accused me of terrorism, specifically related to my online activities. Is that correct?" T4 said, "Yes. Based on the investigation, the evidence points to your involvement in activities that could be classified as such." Simon continued by saying, "And these documents, I presume, are the basis of your claims." T4 replied by saying, "Precisely. These documents contain transcripts of your online communications, financial records, and analysis of your online work." Simon continued by saying, "Let's start with the transcript. Can you specify which communications you deem as evidence of terrorist intent?" T4 opens a file, pulls out a document, and brought out a paper or a pile of documents titled Exhibit A. And T4 continued by saying, "This is a transcript of a private message exchange where you discussed acquiring arms and targeting government buildings." Simon replied by saying, "Discussed? Investigator, are you suggesting I was actively planning to attack government-owned building, or are you interpreting a hypothetical conversation? Can you show me any evidence that I actually acquired those materials?" T4 brought out a different pile of documents titled Exhibit B. He said, "These are financial records showing several large transfers to individuals known to be involved in that groups." Simon replied by saying, "And how do you know these individuals are involved in extremist groups? What is the nature of these groups? Can you provide evidence of my knowledge of their alleged activities? These transfers were for my businesses and not for any other thing else." T4 presents another document titled Exhibit C. He said, "Analysis of your online network showing you were a key node in a network that shared criminal propaganda and incited violence." Simon replied by saying, "Propaganda? Yes. Incitement? No. Can you show me specific instances where I directly called for violence? Did I directly command anyone to commit any violent act?" T4 retrieves a document titled Exhibit D. This is a document showing the link between your online activities and the real-world attacks. Simon replied by saying, "I see. So you are saying that my online activity caused these attacks? Did you find any direct link? Or did you just find that the perpetrators may have read my posts? What evidence do you have that my words were the direct cause of these actions?" T4, which is the officer from the NBI, remained calm. And he continued by saying, "The evidence suggests a clear pattern of influence and incitement." Simon continued by saying, "Influence, perhaps, but influence is not a crime. I am a writer, and I have the right to express my opinions, even if they are unpopular. Incitement requires a direct call to action, which, as you have shown, is not present in this document. The document you present, while they may be concerning, do not prove that I committed any crime." And these are the exact words coming from Mr. Simon.
My people, on don't hear them now. What do you make of it? Drop your comments. But remember, it's Biafra or nothing. Bye for now.